The notification pinged on my phone at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that felt like any other Tuesday. I was standing in the Hendersons' kitchen, measuring their cabinet space for a renovation quote, when Julia's message lit up my screen. "I'm filing for divorce. Please respect my space." That was it. 13 words, no explanation, no emotion, just Julia being Julia. Cold, calculated, and utterly convinced she held all the cards. I stared at the screen for maybe 30 seconds, then typed back, "Perfect." Mrs. Henderson was still talking about granite countertops when I forwarded Julia's message to my lawyer, Jeff Faber. Then I opened my banking app and moved every penny I could legally touch into my personal account. Joint savings, joint checking, even the emergency fund Julia thought I didn't know about. All of it, gone in 6 clicks. My name's Eric Turner. I'm 39 years old. I own a home renovation business, and I've been married to Julia for 12 years. We have 2 kids, Zoe, who's 11 and smart as a whip, and Liam, who's 8 and still believes his dad can fix anything. Julia thinks she's about to take me to the cleaners. She's wrong. See, the thing about Julia is that she's always been too clever for her own good. She's an HR manager at a mid-sized insurance company, the type who knows every regulation, every loophole, every way to make someone's life miserable while staying just inside the lines. She probably spent weeks planning this moment, timing it for maximum impact. What she didn't count on was me being 3 steps ahead. I've known about Gavin Price for 2 months. Gavin's 42, drives a flashy BMW, sells real estate, and has the kind of fake tan that screams midlife crisis. His car's been parked outside our house every Thursday evening while I'm supposedly at poker night with Pete. Julia's book club meetings that run until midnight. Her sudden interest in yoga classes that don't show up on any studio's schedule. Julia's not as sneaky as she thinks she is. I finished the Henderson quote, drove home, and found Julia's car in the driveway. She was in the kitchen, making dinner like nothing had happened. Zoe was at the counter doing homework, and Liam was building something with blocks in the living room. "Hey, Dad," Zoe called out without looking up. "Mom says we're having spaghetti." "Sounds good, kiddo," I said, keeping my voice normal. Julia glanced at me, probably expecting tears or anger or begging. Instead, I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat down at the kitchen table. "Did you get my message?" she asked, stirring the sauce. "I did. Thanks for the heads up." She paused, wooden spoon halfway to her mouth for a taste. "That's it? That's all you have to say?" "What else is there? You want space? You've got it." The confusion on her face was beautiful. This wasn't going according to her script. Julia likes to be in control, likes to manage every conversation, every outcome. She'd probably rehearsed this scene a dozen times, preparing for my emotional breakdown. "We need to talk about the logistics," she said carefully. "The house, the kids, finances, already handled. I moved our joint funds into separate accounts this afternoon. Seemed like the responsible thing to do, given the circumstances. Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." Now she looked genuinely shocked. "You can't do that. Those are marital assets." "We're marital assets. Your email constitutes formal notice of separation. My lawyer says I'm well within my rights to protect my interests." Julia's face went pale. "Your lawyer?" "Jeff Faber, nice guy. Very thorough. He's already started the paperwork." She set down the spoon, hands shaking slightly. "Eric, we need to discuss this like adults. There's a process. The process started when you decided to respect your space with Gavin Price." Zoe looked up from her homework, sensing the tension. Liam kept building his block tower, oblivious. "I don't know what you're talking about," Julia said, but her voice cracked. "Sure you don't. Anyway, I'll be staying in the guest room until we sort out the details. Kids, wash up for dinner." That night, after the kids were asleep, Julia tried again. She knocked on the guest room door, came in without waiting for an answer. She'd changed into the silk nightgown she used to wear when she wanted something. "Eric, please, can we talk about this rationally?" I was lying on the narrow bed, laptop open, reviewing the photos Pete had taken of Gavin's BMW parked in our driveway. Timestamps, license plate clearly visible. Insurance, in case Julia tried to deny everything. "Nothing irrational about it," I said without looking up. "You want a divorce? We're getting a divorce. You want space? You're getting space. I'm being very accommodating. But the money, you can't just freeze me out. I have expenses, obligations, so get a job. Oh wait, you have one. Or ask Gavin. I hear real estate's doing well these days." She sat on the edge of the bed, tried to put her hand on my arm. I moved away. "It's not what you think," she said. "Gavin and I were just friends. He's been helping me through a difficult time." "What difficult time?" "Our marriage, Eric. We've been growing apart for years, you know that." I finally looked at her. Really looked. Julia's still beautiful at 36, still the woman I fell in love with in college. But there's something cold in her eyes now, something calculating that wasn't there when we were young. "Growing apart," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it?" "We want different things. You're content with your little business, this house, this life. I need more." "More like Gavin?" "This isn't about him." "Right. It's about space, your space, which apparently includes my house, my money, and my kids, but not me." She stood up, the silk nightgown rustling. "I was trying to do this the easy way, Eric. Don't make it harder than it has to be." "Harder for who?" But she was already gone, the door clicking shut behind her. I went back to my laptop, opened my email, and started typing. "Jeff, Julia's trying to play games. Attached are photos documenting her relationship with Gavin Price. Also have witness statements from neighbors if needed. She's going to fight dirty, so let's be ready. We protect the kids first, everything else second. But she doesn't get to destroy our family and walk away with half of everything I've built. Not happening." "Eric." My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "This is Charlotte Brooks, Julia's attorney. We need to schedule a meeting immediately. Your actions today were inappropriate and potentially illegal. You cannot freeze your wife out of marital assets without court approval." I smiled and typed back, "Happy to meet. Bring Julia's separation notice. You know, the one where she formally requested space and announced her intention to file for divorce. My lawyer says that changes everything." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then nothing. I set the phone aside and opened a new browser tab. Time to do some research on Gavin Price, real estate license, business address, social media profiles. If Julia wanted to play hardball, she was about to learn that her husband wasn't the pushover she thought he was. The next morning, Julia was gone before I woke up. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. "Staying at Tessa's for a few days. Need time to think." Tessa Morrison, Julia's best friend and biggest enabler. The woman who'd been covering for Julia's book club meetings and yoga classes for months. Perfect. I made breakfast for the kids, got them ready for school, and drove them myself instead of letting them take the bus. On the way, I explained that Mom and Dad were having some grown-up problems, but that we loved them very much, and nothing was their fault. Zoe, being 11 and sharp as a knife, asked, "Are you getting divorced?" "Maybe, sweetheart. We're trying to figure things out." "Is it because of that man who comes over when you're not home?" I nearly ran a red light. "What man?" "The one with the fancy car. Mom said he was a friend from work, but he acts weird, like he's trying too hard to be nice." Liam piped up from the back seat. "I don't like him. He smells funny." "Cologne," Zoe said, with the authority of someone who'd already figured out way too much. "Expensive cologne. Mom started wearing perfume again after he started coming around. Smart kids. Too smart for their own good, maybe, but I was proud of them for being observant. and furious at Julia for putting them in this position. After dropping them off, I drove to my office, a converted garage behind our house where I keep tools, supplies, and business files. Pete was already there, drinking coffee and reading something on his phone. Pete Morrison is my best friend and business partner. Yes, Morrison. He's married to Tessa, which makes this whole situation extra complicated. Pete's a good man, though, loyal, hard-working, and blessed with the kind of common sense that keeps me grounded when I'm tempted to do something stupid. Heard Julia moved out, he said without looking up. News travels fast. Tessa called Amy at 5 this morning, crying about how Julia showed up on her doorstep with 2 suitcases and a story about needing space to think. What's your take on it? Pete set down his phone and looked at me seriously. My take is that my wife's been lying to me for months, covering for your wife's affair, and now she's in the middle of a mess she helped create. You knew? Suspected. Tessa's a terrible liar, always has been. But she's loyal to Julia, and Julia's been her friend since high school. He paused. I told her this morning that she needs to stay out of it from now on. Whatever happens between you and Julia, it's not her business. How'd that go over? About as well as you'd expect. She's convinced Julia's the victim here, that you're being controlling and vindictive. I poured myself coffee from Pete's thermos. Maybe I am being vindictive. Good. Julia's had this coming for a long time. My phone rang. Jeff Faber. Eric, we have a problem. Julia's lawyer filed an emergency motion for temporary spousal support and access to marital funds. Hearings this afternoon. Can they do that? They can try. But that email you forwarded me is going to save your rear end. Judge Morrison, no relation to your Pete, is old school. He doesn't like it when spouses try to have their cake and eat it too. What do I need to do? Be in my office at 2, wear a suit, bring bank statements showing what you moved and why. And Eric, don't talk to Julia or her lawyer without me present. After I hung up, Pete was grinning. What's so funny? Judge Morrison, he's Amy's uncle. Presided over our wedding, actually. Man's got no patience for cheaters or liars. Think that'll help? Can't hurt. But Eric, you sure you want to go nuclear on this? Once you start down this road, there's no going back. I thought about Julia's cold email, her fake concern last night, the way she'd put our kids in the middle of her deception. Most of all, I thought about Gavin Price's BMW in my driveway, the man's smug face when he'd shaken my hand at the neighborhood barbecue last month. She made her choice, I said. Now she gets to live with it. Judge Morrison was exactly what Pete had described, old school, no nonsense, and clearly annoyed at having his afternoon interrupted by what he called marital theatrics. Julia sat at the plaintiff's table with Charlotte Brooks, a sharp-dressed woman in her 50s, who'd probably charged Julia $500 just to file the emergency motion. Julia had dressed for the occasion too, conservative blue dress, minimal makeup, the picture of a wronged wife seeking justice. Jeff Faber and I sat opposite them. Jeff had coached me on courtroom demeanor. Speak only when spoken to, answer questions directly, and let him handle the legal arguments. Your Honor, Charlotte Brooks began, my client finds herself in an impossible situation. Yesterday afternoon, without warning or discussion, her husband unilaterally seized control of all marital assets, leaving her with no access to funds for basic necessities. Judge Morrison looked over his reading glasses. Ms. Brooks, what precipitated this action by the defendant? Charlotte glanced at Julia, who nodded slightly. My client informed her husband that she intended to file for divorce and requested that he respect her need for space during this difficult transition. I see. And how exactly did she communicate this request? Via email, Your Honor. Do we have a copy of this email? Jeff stood up. We do, Your Honor. Defense Exhibit A. The bailiff handed the judge a printed copy of Julia's message. Judge Morrison read it twice, his expression unreadable. Ms. Brooks, your client's email states, and I quote, I'm filing for divorce. Please respect my space. This sounds less like a request for temporary separation and more like formal notice of intent to dissolve the marriage. Your Honor, my client was simply asking for time to think. Counselor, I've been doing this for 32 years. When someone says, I'm filing for divorce, they're not asking for a trial separation. They're announcing their intention to end the marriage. He looked at Julia directly. Mrs. Turner, is that an accurate interpretation of your message? Julia shifted in her seat. Your Honor, I was emotional. I didn't mean to imply. Mrs. Turner, please answer the question. When you sent that email, were you or were you not announcing your intention to divorce your husband? A long pause. I was, Your Honor. Judge Morrison nodded. Mr. Faber, how did your client respond to this announcement? Jeff stood again. Your Honor, upon receiving formal notice that his wife intended to dissolve their marriage, my client took immediate steps to protect his financial interests, as is his right under state law. He moved marital funds into separate accounts pending formal division of assets. And did he leave his wife completely without resources? No, Your Honor, Mrs. Turner has her own income from her employment, her own personal checking account, and access to credit cards in her name. My client simply secured the joint assets to prevent dissipation during the divorce proceedings. Charlotte Brooks jumped up. Your Honor, this was clearly retaliatory. Counselor, your client announced her intention to divorce her husband via email and then complained when he took her at her word. I'm not inclined to reward that kind of gamesmanship. Judge Morrison looked at his notes. Motion for emergency spousal support is denied. Motion for access to marital funds is denied pending formal asset discovery. Mrs. Turner, if you want your husband's money, you should have thought about that before you announced you were divorcing him. Julia's face went white. Charlotte Brooks looked like she'd been slapped. However, the judge continued, I am ordering both parties to mediation before we proceed with formal divorce proceedings. Sometimes these situations can be resolved without destroying two families and making lawyers rich. As we filed out of the courtroom, I caught Julia's eye. She looked stunned, like someone had just explained that actions have consequences. Outside, Charlotte Brooks cornered Jeff and me in the hallway. This isn't over, she said. We'll file for formal spousal support, child support, and half of all marital assets, including your client's business. Jeff smiled pleasantly. Looking forward to it. Discovery should be interesting. After the lawyers left, Julia approached me alone. Eric, please, can we talk? Talk to my lawyer. I'm still your wife. Are you? Because yesterday's email suggested otherwise. She looked around the courthouse hallway, making sure no one was listening. I made a mistake. I was angry, confused. I didn't mean for things to escalate like this. What did you mean? I thought you'd fight for me, for us. I stared at her. Fight for you? Julia, you've been cheating on me for months. You announced you were filing for divorce via email. What exactly was I supposed to fight for? I never said I was cheating. You never said you weren't. She looked away. Gavin and I, it's complicated. No, it's really not. You're married to me, sleeping with him, and now you want a divorce so you can be with him without the guilt. The only complicated part is that you thought I'd make it easy for you. I don't want to hurt the kids. Then you should have thought about that before you brought your boyfriend to our house. Her eyes flashed with anger. He's not my boyfriend, and I never brought him to the house. Julia, his car's been in our driveway every Thursday for 2 months. Zoe and Liam have both mentioned him. You really think I'm that stupid? The anger faded, replaced by something that might have been shame. I never meant for the kids to get involved. But they are involved. They're watching their mother destroy their family for a real estate agent with a midlife crisis and a BMW. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You got bored, you met someone exciting, and you decided your family was disposable. The only thing I don't understand is why you thought I'd cooperate. Julia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and I saw her face change. Problem? I asked. Gavin's wondering where I am. Better run along then. Wouldn't want to keep him waiting. She started to say something else, then stopped. Instead, she walked away, heels clicking on the courthouse marble. I drove home to find Pete waiting in my driveway, holding a beer and wearing a grin. Heard you won, he said. News travels fast in this town. Amy works at the courthouse. She texted me the minute you walked out. He handed me the beer. So what's the next move? Honestly, I was hoping Julia would come to her senses, realize what she was throwing away, and we could work something out for the kids' sake. And now? Now I think she's too far down the rabbit hole to turn back. She's convinced herself that Gavin's her ticket to a better life, and I'm just the obstacle standing in her way. We sat on my front steps, drinking beer and watching the neighborhood kids play in the street. Normal suburban evening, except my wife was at her boyfriend's place, and my marriage was imploding. Pete, can I ask you something? Shoot. How long have you known? He was quiet for a long moment. About Julia and Gavin? Maybe 6 weeks? Tessa let something slip, tried to cover it up, but I put the pieces together. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was stirring up trouble? He had a point. If Pete had come to me with rumors about Julia cheating, I probably would have defended her, told him he was wrong, that Julia would never do that. Besides, Pete continued, I figured you'd figure it out eventually. You're not stupid, Eric. Just trusting. Was trusting. That's done now. So what's the plan? I finished my beer, thought about Julia's shocked face in the courtroom, her anger when I wouldn't play along with her victim routine. The image kept replaying in my head, the way her mouth tightened, the angry little noises she made when the world didn't bend to the narrative she'd rehearsed. She'd practiced that look for months, a touch of wounded bewilderment, the right cadence of hurt, the perfect tilt of the head that said, "How could you doubt me?" Tonight it had fallen apart because I finally did the one thing she hadn't expected. I stayed calm. I didn't apologize. I didn't beg for explanations or proofs. I simply refused to act as her fall guy. Around us, the bar hummed with its usual low-level noise. The dartboard in the corner thunking, a couple arguing softly about dinner, the jukebox playing something that sounded like late-night radio. Pete scrubbed down the counter with the same slow, circular motion he'd used for 20 years, watching me with that mix of curiosity and concern he reserves for his oldest friends. He knew the history, the seasons we'd weathered as men, the mistakes and the recoveries, and he was waiting to see which one I'd choose now. She wants space? She's going to get more space than she ever imagined. She wants to be with Gavin? Let's see how that works out when everyone knows exactly what kind of woman she is and what kind of man he is. Pete raised an eyebrow. He set the rag down and turned toward me, the motion deliberate. Meaning? I let the words roll out, each one considered. Meaning, Julia's spent 12 years building a reputation in this community. Soccer mom, PTA volunteer, respected professional. She thinks she can throw that away for a fling, and nobody will judge her for it. Pete snorted softly, the sound half amusement, half disbelief. And you're going to prove her wrong? I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to stop protecting her from the consequences of her choices. The phrasing felt important. Less threat than removal of a safety net. People who live by a polished image rely on the nets we build around them. Silence, excuses, convenient forgetfulness. I'm done knitting that net for her. My phone buzzed against the bar top, an unknown number lighting the screen. For a second I thought about ignoring it. Then I read the name that flashed. Eric Turner. Mr. Turner? I said into the phone, voice automatic. This is Gavin Price. I think we should meet. I heard the faint rustle of papers on the other end, the sound of a man adjusting his tone. Do we have something to discuss, Gavin? Yes, I think we do. There are some things you should know about Julia, about her feelings, about what she really wants. Pete watched me, his expression sharpening. He'd been listening intently, the way friends do when they sense a turning point. "Do we have something to discuss, Gavin?" I said again, more directly this time. "I think we do. There are some things you should know about Julia, about her feelings, about what she really wants." I'm pretty clear on what Julia wants. She wants a divorce so she can be with you. The statement landed like a stone in a pond, not heavy, but unavoidable. "It's more complicated than that," he protested. "Everyone keeps telling me it's complicated," I said. The word had become a reflexive shield for cheaters and cowards. I watched Pete's fingers drum on the counter in impatience. The bar light fell across Gavin's voice on my phone, painting tiny highlights like a theater light on a stage. "Look, I don't want any trouble. I'm just trying to do the right thing here." I almost laughed at the tone. So earnest, so tired. The right thing would have been not sleeping with another man's wife. There was a long, uncomfortable pause. You could hear the tension through the line, like catching a thread that might unravel whatever fabric they had been weaving. "Can we meet? Tomorrow, maybe? Somewhere neutral?" Gavin asked finally, sounding like a man hoping for a negotiation instead of a reckoning. "Why?" I asked. "Because Julia's confused, and she's making decisions that are going to hurt everyone, including your kids. I think if we talked man to man, we might be able to work something out." The appeal to a higher cause, the kids, the we, felt like a salve he was brandishing to cover the wound he helped make. Pete was shaking his head, making a quick throat-cutting motion with 2 fingers, his version of, "Don't do it." I glanced up at him, but the expression on my face must have told him I already had my mind made up. "Sure, Gavin, let's talk. You know Murphy's Bar on 5th Street? "Yeah. I'll be there at 7. After I hung up, Pete stared at me, incredulous. "Please tell me you're not actually going to negotiate with your wife's boyfriend." I shrugged, the motion more deliberate than casual. "I'm not going to negotiate anything, but I am curious to hear what he has to say." "Eric, this is a bad idea," Pete warned. He was a realist, not reckless. He'd seen the worst of human behavior and knew how quickly words could turn into storms. "Probably," I admitted. "But I want to look this guy in the eye, see what Julia thinks is so special about him." "And then what?" "Then I'm going to explain to Gavin exactly what happens to people who try to destroy my family." The line must be preserved exactly as you requested. The next evening, I walked into Murphy's Bar at exactly 7 o'clock. Gavin was already there, sitting in a corner booth, nursing what looked like an expensive whiskey. He stood up when he saw me, extended his hand like we were old friends meeting for drinks. I ignored the handshake and sat down across from him. "You wanted to talk," I said. Gavin was exactly what I'd expected, mid-40s, gym-tanned, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people make in a week. Everything about him screamed, trying too hard. "Thanks for coming," he said. "I know this is awkward." Awkward isn't the word I'd use. He signaled the bartender, ordered me a beer without asking what I wanted, power play, establishing dominance, amateur hour. "Eric, can I call you Eric? I want you to know that I never intended for things to go this far." "How far did you intend them to go?" "Julia and we connected on a professional level first. I was helping her look at investment properties, ways to build wealth outside of your business." "Investment properties. Real estate's a solid investment, especially in this market. Julia's smart. She understands that." I leaned back in the booth. "So you were helping my wife plan for a future that didn't include me." "That's not how it started. But that's where it ended up." Gavin took a sip of his whiskey, trying to look thoughtful. "Eric, I'm going to be straight with you. Julia's unhappy. She has been for a while. She feels trapped, like she's watching life pass her by while you're content to stay in the same place forever. The same place being married to her and raising our children. The same place being a small-town contractor with small-town dreams. I felt my jaw clench. And you offered her something bigger. I offered her possibilities, a chance to see what else was out there. In your bed. His face flushed slightly. Our relationship evolved naturally. We didn't plan for it to happen. But you didn't try to stop it either. Eric, I'm not the villain here. Julia made her own choices. I finished half my beer in one swallow, studying Gavin's face. He was nervous, trying to project confidence but failing. This wasn't a man who was sure of himself or his position. So, what do you want from me? I asked. I want us to handle this like adults. Julia's going to file for divorce whether we have this conversation or not. The question is whether we make it easy on everyone, especially the kids, or whether we make it ugly. Define easy. You don't contest the divorce. You agree to reasonable spousal support and child custody arrangements. In return, Julia and I keep a low profile until everything's finalized. I almost choked on my beer. You want me to pay my wife to leave me for you? I want everyone to walk away from this with their dignity intact. My dignity's intact, Gavin. I'm not the one cheating on my spouse. Look, I understand you're angry. Do you? Do you understand what it's like to find out your wife has been lying to you for months? Do you understand what it's like to explain to your 8-year-old son why mommy doesn't live at home anymore? Gavin shifted uncomfortably. I have kids too, Eric. From my first marriage. I know how hard divorce can be on them. Your first marriage. How many times have you been married, Gavin? Twice. And both marriages ended in divorce? The first one was a mistake. We were too young. The second, well, people grow apart sometimes. Or sometimes people cheat. His face went red. That's not what happened. No? What did happen? We had different priorities, different goals. She wanted to stay home with the kids. I wanted to build something bigger. I set down my beer and looked at him carefully. Gavin, let me ask you something. What makes you think this thing with Julia is going to work out any differently? Because Julia and I understand each other. We want the same things. Which are success, financial security, a life that's about more than just getting by. And you think I can't provide that? I think you don't want to provide that. Julia told me you turned down 3 major contracts last year because you didn't want to expand the business. He was right about that. I'd turned down contracts that would have required me to hire more people, take on more debt, spend more time away from home. I'd chosen my family over business growth. So you're offering Julia what I wouldn't, a chance to get rich. I'm offering her a partnership, someone who shares her ambitions. And what happens when those ambitions conflict with being a mother? When building wealth means less time with Zoe and Liam? Gavin looked confused, like the question had never occurred to him. That's what I thought, I said. You don't actually care about my kids, do you? They're just part of the package deal. Eric, that's not fair. Fair? You want to talk about fair? I leaned forward. Fair would have been you walking away the first time Julia mentioned she was married. Fair would have been Julia talking to me about her unhappiness instead of running straight to another man. Fair would have been both of you thinking about my children before you decided to blow up their family. We didn't plan for this to happen. But you let it happen, and now you want me to make it easy for you. Gavin finished his whiskey, signaled for another. Eric, I'm trying to be reasonable here. Julia's going to leave you whether I'm in the picture or not. At least this way, she'll be with someone who can take care of her. Take care of her how? Financially, emotionally, I can give her things you can't. Like what? Like a future that's about more than fixing other people's houses and driving kids to soccer practice. I stood up, threw a 20 on the table. Gavin, you just made this very simple for me. What do you mean? I mean you've shown me exactly who you are and exactly what you think of my life, my family, and my marriage. So now I'm going to show you exactly who I am. Eric, wait. But I was already walking away. Behind me, I heard Gavin call out, This doesn't have to be a war. I stopped at the door, turned back. You're right. It doesn't have to be a war, but you made it one the first time you put your hands on my wife. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I called in sick to work and spent the day on reconnaissance. First stop, Gavin's real estate office on Main Street. Upscale place, all glass and chrome, with his photo prominently displayed in the window. Gavin Price, $1 million producer, the caption read. I took pictures. Second stop, the county courthouse, where I pulled public records on Gavin's business licenses, property holdings, and court filings. Interesting reading. 2 divorces, as he'd mentioned, but also a lawsuit from a former business partner alleging fraud. Case was settled out of court, terms sealed, but the filing was public record. Third stop, social media deep dive. Gavin's Instagram was a masterpiece of midlife crisis cliches, gym selfies, expensive restaurant meals, photos of his BMW with captions about living the dream. His Facebook was more professional, but I found what I was looking for in the tagged photos. Gavin at various social events over the past 6 months, often with attractive women who weren't Julia. By noon, I had a complete picture of the man my wife thought was her ticket to a better life. I picked up the kids from school and took them to their favorite pizza place, where I explained that Mom and Dad were definitely getting divorced, but that it had nothing to do with them, and everything would be okay. Zoe, being Zoe, asked the hard questions. Is Mom going to marry that man with the fancy car? I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe. Do you think he'll be a good stepdad? I chose my words carefully. I think your mom is going to have to figure out what's best for everyone. But no matter what happens, you and Liam will always be the most important thing in my life. Will we still live in our house? As long as I have anything to say about it, yes. Liam, who'd been quietly eating pizza, suddenly spoke up. Dad, are you sad? Yeah, buddy, I'm pretty sad. But I'm also grateful that I have you and Zoe, and that's never going to change. That evening, after the kids were in bed, I made a decision that would change everything. I opened Facebook and started typing. Friends and neighbors, I wanted to let everyone know that Julia and I are getting divorced. She's asked for space to pursue other relationships, and I'm respecting her wishes. I'll be raising Zoe and Liam as a single dad, and I want to thank everyone in advance for your support during this difficult time. The kids and I are doing well, and we're looking forward to this new chapter in our lives. I posted it at 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday night, prime time for social media engagement. Within an hour, I had 43 comments and 16 private messages. The comments ranged from supportive, "You're a great dad, Eric, those kids are lucky to have you," to curious, "What happened? You two seem so happy," to gossipy, "I always thought something was off about Julia." The private messages were more interesting. 3 different neighbors mentioned seeing Gavin's car at our house. 2 of Julia's co-workers reached out to say they'd suspected something was going on, and one message stopped me cold. "Eric, this is Sandra Price, Gavin's ex-wife. We should talk." I messaged her back immediately. "I'm free tomorrow evening if you are." Her response came within minutes. "Murphy's Bar, 7 p.m. I'll be the blonde at the bar drinking wine and looking annoyed." The next day, Pete found me in my office, staring at my computer screen. "You look like hell," he said. "Didn't sleep much." "Saw your Facebook post. Bold move." "Seemed like the right thing to do. Let people know what's happening before the rumors get out of control." Pete sat down across from my desk. "Eric, you know this means war, right? Julia's going to be furious when she sees that post." "Good. Maybe she'll finally understand that actions have consequences." "And Gavin?" "Gavin's about to learn some things about consequences, too." My phone buzzed. Text from Julia. "We need to talk. Now." I showed Pete the message. He whistled low. "You going to answer?" "Eventually. Let her stew for a while." At exactly 7 p.m., I walked into Murphy's Bar for the second time in 2 days. Sandra Price was easy to spot. Attractive blonde, early 40s, sitting at the bar with a glass of white wine and an expression that could melt steel. "Sandra?" She turned, looked me up and down. "You're prettier than I expected." "Thanks?" That wasn't a compliment. I was hoping you'd be some kind of ogre so I could understand what Julia sees in my ex-husband. I sat down next to her, ordered a beer. "How long were you married to Gavin?" 5 years. 5 years too long, as it turns out." "What happened?" Sandra laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What happened is that Gavin is a narcissistic sociopath who thinks the world owes him everything and everyone else is just there to serve his needs. Tell me how you really feel. You want the long version or the short version?" "I've got time." Sandra finished her wine, signaled for another. "Gavin and I met when he was selling my first house after my divorce from husband number 1. He was charming, successful, seemed like he had his life together. We got married after dating for 8 months. Red flag number 1, moving too fast. Oh, that was just the beginning. Red flag number 2 was that he insisted on a prenup that protected all of his assets, but left me with nothing if the marriage failed. Red flag number 3 was that he expected me to quit my job and manage his social calendar, his business entertainment, basically become his unpaid personal assistant." "Did you?" "I was stupid and in love, so yes. For about 2 years I played the perfect real estate wife, hosted dinner parties, schmoozed with clients, made Gavin look successful and stable." "What changed?" "I found out about the other women, plural. Gavin has a type, married women who are bored with their lives and looking for excitement. He targets them specifically." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Targets them how?" "He finds women whose husbands are successful but not flashy, women who have money but feel underappreciated. He offers them attention, expensive dinners, promises of a more exciting life. Then he seduces them, convinces them to leave their husbands, and moves on to the next target once the divorce is finalized." "How many times has he done this?" "That I know of, at least 4 times since our divorce. Julia makes 5. I finished my beer in one swallow. "Does Julia know about the others?" "I doubt it. Gavin's very good at making each woman feel like she's special, like she's the one who finally made him want to settle down. But he doesn't settle down. Gavin doesn't want a wife, Eric. He wants conquest, the thrill of taking something that belongs to someone else, proving that he's more attractive, more successful, more desirable than the husband." "So what happens to Julia when he gets bored?" Sandra smiled grimly. "Same thing that happened to the others. He'll find some excuse to end things. She's too clingy, too demanding, not ambitious enough. Then he'll move on to the next target." "How long does the process usually take?" 6 months to a year. Depends on how much drama he can milk out of the situation." I thought about Julia's email, her certainty that she was making the right choice, her conviction that Gavin represented her chance at a better life. "Sandra, would you be willing to talk to Julia? Tell her what you just told me?" I tried that with wife number 4. She didn't believe me. Thought I was just a bitter ex trying to cause trouble. What if I could prove that Gavin's already looking for his next target? Sandra's eyes sharpened. "What do you mean?" I pulled out my phone, showed her the Instagram photos I'd found. Gavin with various women at restaurants, bars, social events, all recent, all while he was supposedly in a committed relationship with Julia. "Son of a bastard," Sandra muttered. "He's not even trying to hide it." "The question is, how do we make sure Julia sees this?" Sandra grinned, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked genuinely happy. "Eric, I think you and I are going to be very good friends." We spent the next hour planning. Sandra knew Gavin's patterns, his favorite restaurants, his social calendar. I knew Julia's schedule, her friends, her weaknesses. By the time we left Murphy's bar, we had a plan that would expose both Julia and Gavin for exactly what they were. Selfish people who'd destroyed a family for a fantasy that was never going to last. The plan went into motion the following Saturday. Julia had the kids for the day. Court-ordered visitation that she'd insisted on to prove she was still a good mother. She'd planned to take them to the zoo, then to lunch, a perfect opportunity to show everyone what a devoted parent she was. What she didn't know was that Sandra and I would be at the same restaurant, at the same time, with a folder full of photos documenting Gavin's extracurricular activities. The restaurant was busy, weekend lunch crowd, lots of families. Julia sat with Zoe and Liam at a table near the window, playing the part of the devoted single mother. She'd dressed carefully, casual but put together, the kind of outfit that said, "I'm handling this divorce with grace and dignity." Sandra and I took a table across the room, close enough to observe but far enough away to avoid immediate detection. "There she is," I said quietly. Sandra studied Julia with professional interest. "She's pretty, younger than his usual type, but pretty." His usual type? Gavin usually goes for women in their 40s, women who are starting to feel invisible, worried about getting older. Julia's still young enough to have options, which makes this interesting. Interesting how? It means he's either genuinely infatuated with her, or she has something he wants beyond just the thrill of the chase. I thought about Gavin's comments about Julia's ambition, her desire for financial success. Maybe she's not just a target. Maybe she's a partner. In what? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. We watched Julia interact with the kids, smiling and laughing, playing the role of the fun mom, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept checking her phone, the forced quality of her cheerfulness. "She's waiting for someone," Sandra observed. "Gavin? Has to be. Look at how she's positioned. She can see the entrance. She's checking her appearance in the window reflection. She keeps looking at her phone." Sure enough, 10 minutes later, Gavin walked in. He'd dressed down for the occasion, khakis and a polo shirt instead of his usual suit, but he still looked like someone trying too hard to appear casual. Julia's face lit up when she saw him. She waved him over, and he approached the table with a smile that looked genuine enough. "Kids," Julia said, as Gavin sat down, "you remember Mr. Price?" Zoe nodded politely but didn't smile. Liam looked uncomfortable, scooting closer to his mother. "How are you guys doing?" Gavin asked, his voice artificially cheerful. "Fine," Zoe said shortly. Good. Your mom tells me you're both doing great in school." Neither kid responded. The silence stretched until Julia jumped in with forced enthusiasm. "Gavin thought it might be fun to go to the arcade after lunch. Would you like that?" Zoe looked at her mother with an expression that was far too mature for an 11-year-old. "Is Dad going to be there?" "No, sweetheart. This is just us." "Then I'd rather go home." Julia's smile faltered. "Zoe, don't be rude." "I'm not being rude. I just want to go home." Gavin tried to salvage the situation. "Hey, I understand this is weird for you guys. Change is hard, but I'm hoping we can be friends." Liam finally spoke up. "Are you going to marry our mom?" The question hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Julia looked panicked, Gavin looked trapped, and both kids stared at them with the kind of direct honesty that adults spend their lives trying to avoid. "Well," Gavin said carefully, "your mom and we're getting to know each other." "But are you going to marry her?" Liam pressed. "Maybe someday, buddy, if that's what makes everyone happy." Zoe stood up abruptly. "I want to call Dad." "Zoe, sit down," Julia said sharply. "We're having lunch." "I want to go home. I want to call Dad." "Your father isn't part of this conversation." "He should be. This is stupid." Julia's face went red. "Zoe Marie Turner, you will not speak to me that way." "Why not? You spoke to Dad that way. You sent him an email instead of talking to him like a person." The entire restaurant had gone quiet. Other families were staring, and Julia realized she was losing control of the situation. "We'll discuss this at home," she said through gritted teeth. I am home when I'm with Dad. This isn't home. This is just weird. Zoe walked away from the table, her shoulders stiff, movements quick and purposeful, the universal body language of a teenager who had decided she was done with this particular scene. She didn't look back as she threaded her way through the maze of tables toward the restaurant's entrance, her ponytail swaying with every step. Julia half rose from her chair, torn between chasing her daughter and pretending everything was fine. You could see the war on her face, the maternal instinct to follow versus the social reflex to save face. For a moment, she hovered there like a malfunctioning signal light. Then Gavin, ever the gallant interloper, made the decision for her. His voice was calm, measured, maybe even a little self-satisfied. "Go," he said quietly. "I'll take care of the check." Julia hesitated only a second longer before slipping her purse from the back of her chair and hurrying after Zoe, her heels clicking against the tile. The sound faded, leaving Gavin alone with Liam, who was still sitting upright in his seat, a fork in one hand and an untouched piece of chicken on his plate. He was studying Gavin with that unwavering, unfiltered intensity that only children can manage, a gaze sharp enough to make most adults uncomfortable. "She doesn't like you," Liam said finally, his tone matter-of-fact, not cruel. It was simply an observation, like stating the weather. Gavin blinked, caught off guard. "I know, buddy. Sometimes it takes time for people to warm up to each other." Liam's expression didn't change. He just tilted his head slightly. "She likes Dad." There was no accusation in the words, just a quiet certainty that made them sting all the more. Gavin tried for a reassuring smile, but it came out thin and fragile. "I know that too. So, why doesn't Mom live with Dad anymore?" That one landed like a punch. Gavin's eyes darted toward the entrance, probably hoping Julia would reappear and rescue him from this small, unflinching truth-teller. The other diners, sensing the tension, had started watching from behind polite half-turns and raised menus. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes," Gavin said finally, voice softer now, the kind of tone people use when they think a child might not understand, but still deserves an answer. Liam leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes narrowing slightly. "Did you make a mistake?" Gavin hesitated. "What do you mean?" "Did you make Mom not live with Dad anymore?" Across the room, Sandra and I exchanged glances. Sandra had leaned forward in her chair, fascinated. The kid was fearless. He was asking the questions the adults tiptoed around, slicing through all the polite pretense like a scalpel. Gavin cleared his throat, looking suddenly older, suddenly smaller. "It's complicated, Liam," the boy frowned. "That's what all the grown-ups say, but it's not complicated." He set down his fork and stared at Gavin with a clarity that felt almost brutal. "You wanted Mom, so you took her away from Dad. That's not complicated. That's just mean." The air around the table seemed to tighten. Gavin's face drained of color. "Liam, it's not that simple." "Yes, it is." Liam's voice was quiet, but steady. "Dad explained it to me. You wanted something that wasn't yours, so you took it. And now everyone's sad, except you." He didn't wait for a response. He slid out of his chair, his napkin falling to the floor like a white flag, and walked toward the entrance. Small, dignified, resolute. The restaurant went utterly silent for a moment, save for the faint clink of silverware in the background. Gavin sat frozen, staring at the door, the half-eaten plates in front of him now feeling like evidence of some moral crime. The waitress hovered uncertainly at the edge of the table, unsure whether to approach. Sandra and I watched as he sat there for almost 5 full minutes, clearly debating whether to chase after Julia and the kids, or just disappear. Finally, with a resigned sigh, he reached into his wallet, threw a few bills on the table, far too many, and walked out without another word. "Well," Sandra said after a long moment, leaning back in her chair, "that was educational." I nodded. Those kids are smarter than their mother. Kids usually are, she said. They see things clearly because they don't have agendas. I thought about Zoe's sharp, cold anger, the way Liam had stared down Gavin like a tiny judge handing down a sentence. They'd both seen through him, the fake humility, the forced charm, the self-serving excuses. They know he's not going to stick around, I said quietly. Of course they do. Sandra took a sip of her wine, thoughtful. The question is, when will Julia figure it out? My phone buzzed. A text message from Julia lit up the screen. The kids want to come home. Can you pick them up? I typed back a quick reply. On my way. Sandra and I stood to leave, the clatter of dishes and low hum of conversation resuming behind us as the restaurant gradually forgot the scene that had just unfolded. Outside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of rain. As we walked toward the door, Sandra reached into her purse and handed me a small cream-colored business card. I frowned. What's this? My private investigator. If you really want to know what Gavin's up to, she can find out. But Eric, be sure you want to know. Once you open that door, you can't close it again. I pocketed the card. I'm sure. Good, because Julia's going to need all the help she can get when this thing falls apart, and those kids are going to need their father to be the stable one. I drove to Gavin's condo to pick up my children, thinking about Sandra's warning. She was right. Once I started down this path, there would be no going back. But Julia had made her choice, and Gavin had made his. Now it was time for them to live with the consequences. The private investigator Sandra recommended was named Kelly Chen, and she was everything I'd expected and nothing like I'd imagined. Mid-30s, professional but not flashy, with the kind of quiet intensity that suggested she was very good at her job. We met at a coffee shop downtown, away from the neighborhood gossip network. Sandra filled me in on the basics, Kelly said, opening a leather portfolio. Cheating spouse, messy divorce, you want to know what you're dealing with. That's right. Before we start, I need to be clear about something. I find information. What you do with that information is up to you, but I don't participate in revenge fantasies or illegal activities. Understood. Good. Now, what specifically do you want to know about Gavin Price? I thought about it. Everything. His finances, his business practices, his other relationships. I want to know who he really is. And your wife? Julia's not the enemy here. She's making terrible choices, but she's still the mother of my children. I want to protect the kids, not destroy their mother. Kelly nodded approvingly. That's a healthy attitude. A lot of people in your situation want to burn everything down. I'm tempted, but it wouldn't help Zoe and Liam. Smart man. Okay, here's how this works. I charge a daily rate plus expenses. I'll investigate Gavin thoroughly. Finances, business dealings, personal relationships, legal history. For Julia, I'll focus on anything that might affect custody or child support. How long will it take? 2 weeks for a preliminary report, another 2 weeks for the deep dive. But Eric, and I'm speaking from experience here, you might not like what I find. I can handle it. Can you? Because if Gavin's running some kind of scam, if Julia's involved in something shady, if there are things about your marriage you didn't know, that information doesn't come with an undo button. I thought about Liam's direct questions at the restaurant, Zoe's anger, Julia's certainty that she was making the right choice. My kids deserve to know the truth about the people in their lives, whatever that truth is. Kelly closed her portfolio. All right then, I'll be in touch. That evening, Julia called to arrange another visitation with the kids. She sounded different, less confident, more tentative. How are Zoe and Liam doing? She asked. They're confused, angry, and hurt. Pretty much what you'd expect. Eric, about yesterday at the restaurant, what about it? The kids were rude to Gavin. That can't happen again. I felt my jaw clench. Julia, our children are dealing with the fact that their mother left their father for another man. If they're not ready to play happy family with your boyfriend, that's not rude. That's normal. Gavin's trying to build a relationship with them. Why? The question seemed to catch her off guard. What do you mean, why? I mean, why is it important to Gavin to have a relationship with my children? He's never been married to someone with kids before. What's his motivation? He cares about me, so he cares about them. Does he? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like he's trying to play house without understanding what that actually means. You don't know him, Eric. You're right, I don't. But I know my kids, and they don't trust him. Maybe you should ask yourself why. Long pause. Can I see them this weekend? Of course. But Julia, if Gavin's going to be there, the kids need to know in advance. No more surprises. Fine. It'll just be me. After I hung up, I found Zoe in her room, doing homework with unusual intensity. Hey kiddo, how was school? Fine. Want to talk about yesterday? She looked up from her math worksheet. Mom's mad at me. Why? Because I was mean to her boyfriend. I sat on the edge of her bed. Do you think you were mean? I don't know. Maybe. But Dad, I don't like him. Why not? Zoe put down her pencil, choosing her words carefully. He tries too hard. Like when adults talk to little kids in that fake voice. That's how he talks to me and Liam, like we're stupid. What else? He looks at Mom weird, like she's a prize he won or something. And he doesn't really listen when we talk. He just waits for us to stop talking so he can say something about himself. I was continually amazed by my daughter's perception. Zoe, you know that none of this is your fault, right? The divorce, Mom moving out, all of it. You and Liam didn't cause any of this. I know. But Dad, I'm scared. Scared of what? What if Mom marries him? What if we have to live with him sometimes? What if he's mean to us when Mom's not around? I pulled her into a hug. That's not going to happen, sweetheart. Even if Mom marries Gavin someday, you and Liam will always have a home here with me. Always. Promise? Promise. The next morning, Pete found me in the office, staring at my computer screen and drinking my 4th cup of coffee. You look terrible, he said. Thanks. You're a real confidence booster. Seriously, when's the last time you slept? I couldn't remember. The past week had been a blur of lawyer meetings, custody arrangements, and trying to keep my business running while my personal life imploded. I'm fine. No, you're not. You're running on anger and caffeine, and that's not sustainable. Pete was right, but I didn't know how to stop. Every time I tried to relax, I thought about Julia with Gavin, about my kids being forced to spend time with a man they didn't trust, about the life I'd built being systematically dismantled. Pete, can I ask you something? Shoot. Do you think I'm handling this wrong? Being too aggressive, too vindictive? Pete sat down, considered the question seriously. Honestly, I think you're handling it exactly right. Julia made a choice to blow up your family for a guy she barely knows. You're protecting your kids and your interests. That's not vindictive. That's responsible. But you need to be careful not to let this consume you. Zoe and Liam need their dad to be present, not just angry. He was right again. I'd been so focused on the war with Julia and Gavin that I'd lost sight of what really mattered, being a good father. My phone rang. Kelly Chen. I've got your preliminary report, she said. Can you meet this afternoon? How bad is it? Let's just say your instincts about Gavin were correct. We met at the same coffee shop. Kelly had a thick folder and an expression that suggested I wasn't going to like what she'd found. Gavin first, she said, opening the folder. His real estate license has been suspended twice in the past 5 years for ethical violations. Nothing criminal, but enough to suggest a pattern of questionable business practices. What kind of violations? Misrepresenting property values, failing to disclose known defects, steering clients toward properties where he had undisclosed financial interests. Is he still licensed? Technically, yes, but he's on probation with the state real estate board. Kelly pulled out a financial report. His personal finances are interesting. On paper, he looks successful. Nice condo, expensive car, designer clothes, but he's leveraged to the hilt. The condo has 2 mortgages, the car is leased, and he's got significant credit card debt. How significant? North of $60,000. He's basically living paycheck to paycheck, but maintaining the appearance of success. I thought about Gavin's expensive whiskey, his talk about investment properties and building wealth. What about his relationship history? Kelly's expression darkened. This is where it gets ugly. I found 4 women who've had relationships with Gavin over the past 3 years. All of them were married when they met him. All of them left their husbands for him. All of them were discarded within 6 months. Discarded how? Different excuses, same pattern. He'd convince them to file for divorce, promise them a future together, then find reasons to end the relationship once the divorce was final. What happened to the women? 2 of them are still single, struggling financially. 1 remarried. Took her almost 2 years to recover emotionally. The 4th one, Kelly paused. The 4th one had a complete breakdown. Lost custody of her children, lost her job, ended up in therapy for severe depression. I felt sick. And Julia has no idea about any of this? I doubt it. Gavin's very careful about keeping his past relationships separate. None of these women knew about the others until after he'd moved on. Kelly pulled out another document. But here's the really interesting part. I found evidence that Gavin's been in contact with at least 2 other married women while he's been seeing Julia. She showed me printed emails, social media messages, restaurant receipts. Gavin had been cultivating other relationships even while convincing Julia to leave me. He's already planning his exit strategy, I said. Looks that way. Eric, I need to ask, what are you planning to do with this information? I stared at the evidence spread across the table. Photos, financial records, witness statements. Enough to destroy Gavin's reputation and probably his career. I don't know yet. Because if you're thinking about confronting him or exposing him publicly, you need to be very careful. Men like Gavin don't react well when they're cornered. What do you mean? I mean, he's a narcissist who's built his entire identity around being smarter and more successful than everyone else. If that image is threatened, he might do something desperate. I thought about my children, about Julia's safety, about the potential consequences of going to war with someone who had nothing left to lose. What about Julia? I asked. Kelly's expression softened slightly. Your wife is a victim here, Eric. She thinks she's found someone who understands her ambitions, who can give her the life she wants. She has no idea she's just another mark in a pattern of manipulation. Should I tell her? Would she believe you? Probably not. Julia was convinced that Gavin was her salvation, her escape from a life she'd decided was too small. Evidence of his deception would just look like a desperate attempt by her bitter ex-husband to sabotage her happiness. There's something else, Kelly said. About Julia. My stomach clenched. What? She's been moving money. Small amounts but consistent. Transferring funds from your joint accounts into a personal account you probably don't know about. How much? About $15,000 over the past 4 months. I felt like I'd been punched. She's been planning this for 4 months? At least. Eric, I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. I stared at the financial records, seeing my marriage from a completely different perspective. While I'd been working to support our family, Julia had been systematically preparing to leave me. The secret account, the affair with Gavin, the cold email announcing her intentions, it had all been planned. Is there more? One more thing. Julia's been in contact with a family lawyer since January. Not Charlotte Brooks, someone else. Someone who specializes in high-asset divorces. High asset? We're comfortable, but we're not rich. No, but your business is worth more than you might think. Julia's been having it evaluated. Kelly showed me documents I'd never seen before. Professional appraisals of my equipment, my client list, my reputation in the community. Julia had been preparing to claim half of everything I'd built, including the business that supported our family. I closed the folder, unable to look at any more evidence of my wife's betrayal. Kelly, I need some time to process this. Of course. But Eric, be careful who you trust. Julia's been planning this for months, and Gavin's a professional manipulator. They're both playing games you're not equipped for. What would you do if you were in my position? Kelly was quiet for a long moment. I'd protect my children first, my assets second, and my pride last, in that order. After Kelly left, I sat in my truck in the coffee shop parking lot, trying to make sense of everything I'd learned. Julia wasn't just leaving me for another man. She'd been systematically planning to take everything I'd worked for. Gavin wasn't just a midlife crisis. He was a predator who'd done this before and would do it again. My phone buzzed. Text from Julia. Can we meet tonight? Without the lawyers. I think we need to talk. I stared at the message, wondering if this was genuine remorse or just another manipulation. After 4 months of secret planning, after moving money and having my business appraised, after bringing a con artist into my children's lives, Julia wanted to talk. I texted back, Murphy's Bar, 8 p.m. Time to find out exactly what my wife had to say for herself. Julia was already at Murphy's Bar when I arrived, sitting in the same corner booth where I'd met with Gavin a week earlier. She looked tired, older somehow, like the stress of maintaining her double life was finally catching up with her. Thanks for coming, she said as I sat down. What do you want to talk about, Julia? She fidgeted with her wedding ring. She was still wearing it, I noticed. I want to apologize. For what, specifically? For the way I handled things, the email, the lawyers, all of it. I should have talked to you first. I signaled the bartender for a beer. Should have talked to me before you started sleeping with Gavin, you mean? Her face flushed. Eric, please. I'm trying to be honest here. Are you? Because I've learned some interesting things about honesty lately. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone, showed her one of the photos Kelly had found. Gavin at a restaurant with another woman, dated 2 weeks ago. Julia stared at the photo, confusion and hurt flickering across her face. Where did you get this? Does it matter? The question is, did you know Gavin was seeing other people? He's not seeing other people. This is probably just a business dinner. Julia, look at the photo. Really look at it. She looked again, and I watched her face change as she took in the details. Gavin's hand on the woman's arm. The intimate way they were leaning toward each other. The woman's wedding ring clearly visible. This doesn't mean anything, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. It means Gavin's exactly who I thought he was. A predator who targets married women, convinces them to leave their husbands, then moves on to the next victim. You don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out more photos. Gavin with different women at different restaurants. Social media screenshots showing him at events Julia knew nothing about. Financial records showing his mounting debts and failed business ventures. Julia, you're not the first married woman Gavin seduced. You're not even the second or third. You're just the latest in a long line of victims. She pushed the photos away. Stop it. I found 4 other women, Julia. 4 marriages he helped destroy. Want to know what happened to them after he got bored and moved on? Eric, stop. One of them lost custody of her children. Another one had a complete nervous breakdown. All of them were left with nothing while Gavin moved on to his next target. Julia's hands were shaking now. You're lying. You're making this up to hurt me. Am I? Call Sandra Price. She's his ex-wife. Ask her about Gavin's pattern of behavior. I'm not calling anyone. This is just you trying to sabotage my relationship because you can't stand that I'm happy. Happy? Julia, look at yourself. You look exhausted. You're stressed, The kids don't trust you, and you're defending a man who's been cheating on you since day one. Gavin loves me. Gavin loves the idea of taking something that belongs to someone else. Once you're divorced, once he's proven he can steal another man's wife, he'll lose interest and move on. Julia stood up abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. No, you don't. But you should listen to this. I know about the secret bank account. She froze halfway to standing. I know you've been moving money for 4 months. I know you've been planning this divorce since January. I know you had my business appraised without telling me. Julia sank back into the booth, her face pale. How? Does it matter? The point is, while I was working to support our family, you were plotting to take half of everything I've built. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Julia? Explain it to me. She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. I felt trapped, she said finally. Like I was disappearing. Like I was just Eric's wife and Zoe and Liam's mother, but not my own person. So you decided to become Gavin's person instead? I decided to take control of my life. To stop settling for mediocrity. Mediocrity? Is that what our marriage was to you? Eric, you're a good man, a good father, but you have no ambition. You're content to stay exactly where you are forever. I'm content to prioritize my family over making money. And I wanted more than that. I wanted to build something, to achieve something, to matter. You do matter. You matter to me, to Zoe, to Liam. That's not enough anymore. The words hung between us like a final judgment. Julia had just admitted that being a wife and mother wasn't enough for her, that the family we'd built together was somehow inadequate. So Gavin offered you more? Gavin sees my potential. He believes I can be successful, that I can build wealth, that I can be more than just a suburban housewife. And what happens when Gavin gets bored with your potential? When he finds another married woman with more money or better connections? That's not going to happen. Julia, it's already happening. Those photos I showed you, they were taken while you were together. Gavin's been cultivating his next relationship while promising you a future. She looked at the photos again, and I saw doubt creep into her eyes. Even if that's true, she said quietly, it doesn't change anything between us. Our marriage was over before I met Gavin. Was it? Or did you just decide it was over because staying married required work and leaving seemed easier? It wasn't easier. This has been the hardest thing I've ever done. Then why do it? Why throw away 12 years? Why hurt the kids? Why destroy everything we built together? Julia looked up at me, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married, vulnerable, uncertain, searching for something she couldn't name. Because I was afraid, she said. Afraid that if I stayed, I'd wake up at 50 and realize I'd wasted my life. Afraid that I'd never know what I was capable of if I didn't take the chance. And now? Now I don't know anything anymore. We sat in silence for several minutes. Around us, the bar continued its normal rhythm. People laughing, talking, living their lives while mine fell apart. Julia, I said finally, I want you to know something. Despite everything you've done, despite the lies and the betrayal and the way you've hurt our children, I would have worked with you. If you'd come to me honestly, if you'd told me you were unhappy and wanted to make changes, we could have figured it out together. Would we have? Or would you have talked me out of it, convinced me to be satisfied with what we had? I guess we'll never know. My phone buzzed, text message from an unknown number. This is Gavin. We need to talk. Now. I showed Julia the message. Looks like your boyfriend wants to chat. Don't answer it. Why not? Afraid of what he might say? Before Julia could respond, Gavin walked into the bar. He looked agitated, angry, like a man whose carefully constructed world was falling apart. He spotted us immediately and walked over, his face flushed with anger. What the hell do you think you're doing? He said to me, having a conversation with my wife. Your ex-wife, and she doesn't need you filling her head with lies about me. Julia looked between us, confusion and fear on her face. Gavin, what are you talking about? Your husband hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me. He's been spreading lies, trying to sabotage our relationship. They're not lies, I said calmly. They're facts. Documented facts. Gavin's face went red. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Eric. Don't I? I know about the 4 other married women you've seduced and abandoned. I know about your financial problems, your suspended real estate license, your pattern of targeting vulnerable women. Gavin, Julia said quietly, is this true? Of course it's not true. He's making it up because he can't stand losing you. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to Kelly's photos. Julia, here's Gavin with another woman last Tuesday. Here's him with a different woman last Friday. Here are financial records showing he's $60,000 in debt. Here are witness statements from his previous victims. Julia took the phone, scrolled through the evidence. With each photo, each document, her face grew paler. Gavin, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Who are these women? Business associates, clients. Julia, you can't believe this nonsense. Business associates who you're holding hands with? Clients who you're kissing in restaurant parking lots? Gavin grabbed for the phone, but I pulled it back. Don't, I said. Don't make this worse than it already is. Worse? You've destroyed everything. You couldn't just let her go, could you? You had to poison her against me. I didn't poison her against anything. I just showed her who you really are. Julia was staring at the photos, tears streaming down her face. How long? She asked Gavin. How long have you been seeing other women? Julia, it's not what you think. How long? Gavin looked around the bar, realizing that other patrons were watching the drama unfold. Can we discuss this somewhere private? No, Julia said, her voice stronger now. Answer the question. How long have you been cheating on me? I haven't been cheating. We're not married, Julia. We never made any exclusive commitments. The words hit Julia like a physical blow. Exclusive commitments? I left my husband for you. I'm getting divorced for you. And I never asked you to do that. You told me you loved me. You told me we had a future together. We do have a future. But that doesn't mean we can't see other people while we're figuring things out. I watched Julia's face cycle through emotions. Hurt, anger, disbelief, and finally, a cold understanding. You never intended to be exclusive with me, she said. Julia, you're overreacting. I destroyed my marriage for you. I hurt my children for you. I gave up everything for you. Nobody forced you to do any of that. You're right. Nobody forced me. I chose to believe your lies because I wanted to believe them. Julia stood up, her composure returning. We're done, Gavin. Julia, wait. No, we're done. Don't call me, don't text me, don't come to my apartment. We're done. Gavin looked desperate now, realizing his latest victim was slipping away before he was ready to discard her. You're making a mistake. You're throwing away your chance at real happiness because your bitter ex-husband filled your head with lies. Julia looked at him with something approaching pity. My mistake was believing that happiness could be built on someone else's pain. She turned to me. Eric, I need to go, but can we talk tomorrow? About the kids, about everything? Of course. After Julia left, Gavin and I sat in silence for several minutes. He ordered a whiskey, drank it in one gulp, ordered another. You think you've won, he said finally. I think I've protected my family from a predator. Your family was already broken, Eric. I didn't break it. Julia did when she decided she wanted more than you could give her. Maybe, but you exploited that break for your own purposes. I gave her what she wanted. Excitement, attention, the promise of a better life. You gave her lies. I gave her possibilities. The fact that she couldn't handle the reality of those possibilities isn't my fault. I finished my beer, threw money on the table. Gavin, let me give you some advice. Stay away from my family. Stay away from Julia. Stay away from my kids. Stay away from me. Or what? Or I'll make sure everyone in this town knows exactly who you are and what you do to families. You think you can destroy me? I think you've already destroyed yourself. I'm just deciding whether to help you finish the job. I left Gavin sitting alone at the bar, staring into his whiskey and contemplating the ruins of his latest conquest. The next morning, Julia called early. Eric, can you come over to my apartment? I need to talk to you, and I don't want to do it over the phone. What about? About everything. About us, about the kids, about what happens next. An hour later, I stood outside Julia's temporary apartment, a furnished place she'd rented month to month while the divorce proceedings played out. She answered the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt, no makeup, looking younger and more vulnerable than I'd seen her in months. Thanks for coming, she said. The apartment was sterile, impersonal, nothing like the home we'd built together. Julia noticed me looking around. It's not much, she said. I didn't want to invest in furniture until I knew where I'd end up. Where do you want to end up? She sat on the couch, gestured for me to sit across from her. I don't know anymore. A week ago, I thought I knew exactly what I wanted. Now I feel like I don't know anything. What changed? You mean besides finding out that the man I left my husband for is a serial cheater with a pattern of destroying marriages? Yeah, besides that. Julia smiled slightly, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in months. I think what changed is that I finally understood the difference between wanting something and being willing to pay the price for it. Meaning I wanted excitement, success, a different kind of life. But I wasn't willing to pay the price of hurting you and the kids to get it. But you did hurt us. I know, and I can't undo that. But Eric, I need you to know, I never meant for things to go this far. I never meant to destroy our family. What did you mean to do? Julia was quiet for a long time, choosing her words carefully. I meant to force a conversation. About our future. About what we both wanted, about whether we were just going through the motions or actually building something together. By having an affair? By showing you that I had options, that I wasn't just going to accept being taken for granted forever. I stared at her. Julia, do you realize how twisted that is? You cheated on me to prove that I should appreciate you more? When you say it like that, it sounds insane. It is insane. If you wanted to talk about our future, you could have talked to me. If you felt taken for granted, you could have told me. Instead, you went behind my back, lied to me for months, and brought another man into our children's lives. I know it was wrong. But Eric, I felt invisible in our marriage. Like I was just there to take care of everyone else's needs, while my own dreams didn't matter. What dreams? You never told me about any dreams. Because every time I brought up doing something different, expanding my career, taking risks, you found reasons why it wouldn't work. I thought back over our conversations, trying to remember what she was talking about. You mean like when you wanted to quit your job and start a consulting business? Yes. Julia, we had a mortgage, 2 kids, and no savings. Starting a business would have meant giving up our only stable income with no guarantee of success. See? That's exactly what I'm talking about. You immediately focused on why it wouldn't work instead of how we could make it work. I focused on being responsible. You focused on being safe. There's a difference. We stared at each other across the sterile apartment, 12 years of marriage and months of betrayal hanging between us. So what now? I asked. Now I don't know. I've made such a mess of everything. I've hurt you. I've hurt the kids. I've destroyed any trust between us. I don't know if there's a way back from this. Is that what you want? A way back? Julia looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. I want my children to forgive me. I want to be the mother they deserve instead of the selfish woman who put her own wants ahead of their needs. And us? I don't know if there can be an us anymore, Eric. I don't know if you can ever trust me again, and I don't know if I can live with the guilt of what I've done. But I know that Gavin was never the answer. He was just an escape from problems I should have faced honestly. My phone rang. Jeff Faber. Eric, we have a situation. Julia's lawyer just filed a motion to dismiss all divorce proceedings. I looked at Julia, who was watching my face intently. She wants to stop the divorce? Apparently. Can you be in my office this afternoon? After I hung up, Julia nodded. I called Charlotte this morning, told her I wanted to withdraw the divorce petition. Why? Because I realized that running away from our problems isn't the same as solving them, and because I realized that what I really want isn't a different life. It's a better version of the life we already have. I felt something shift inside me, a loosening of the anger and hurt I'd been carrying for weeks. Julia, even if we stop the divorce, that doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was. You cheated on me. You lied to me. You brought another man into our children's lives. Those things happened, and they can't unhappen. I know, and I don't expect you to just forgive and forget. But Eric, is there any chance at all, that we could try to rebuild something? Not the marriage we had, but something new? Something better? I thought about Zoe's anger, Liam's confusion, the months of lies and betrayal. I thought about the secret bank account, the business appraisal, the systematic planning of my destruction. But I also thought about 12 years of marriage, 2 beautiful children, and the woman sitting across from me who looked genuinely remorseful for the first time since this nightmare began. I don't know, I said honestly. I want to say yes, but I don't know if I can get past what you've done. What if we tried counseling, real counseling, not just marriage therapy to check a box, but actual work on understanding why this happened and how to make sure it never happens again? You'd be willing to do that? I'd be willing to do whatever it takes. Eric, I've spent the last few months chasing a fantasy of a perfect life with a perfect man, and all I accomplished was destroying the real life I had with a good man. I'm not perfect, Julia. I know I took you for granted sometimes. I know I was overly cautious about taking risks. And I know I was selfish and dishonest and willing to hurt the people I love most to get what I thought I wanted. We sat in silence, both of us thinking about the road that had led us to this moment. If we try this, I said finally, there have to be conditions. Whatever you need. Complete honesty. No more secrets, no more lies, no more hidden bank accounts or private conversations with lawyers. Agreed. And you have to rebuild the trust with Zoe and Liam. They're angry and hurt, and they don't understand why their mother chose a stranger over their family. I know. That's going to be the hardest part. And Julia, if you ever cheat on me again, we're done. No second chances, no explanations, no counseling. Done. I understand. I looked around the sterile apartment, thinking about our real home, our real life, our real family. There's something else. I need to know that you're choosing our marriage because you want to be married to me, not because Gavin turned out to be a disappointment. Julia met my eyes directly. Eric, Gavin was never the real problem. The real problem was that I convinced myself that happiness was something that happened to me instead of something I created. I thought if I just found the right person or the right situation, everything would be perfect. But perfect doesn't exist. Good exists. Love exists. Family exists. And I threw all of that away chasing a fantasy. So why come back now? Because I realized that the life I was running from is the life I actually want. Not the fantasy version where everything's easy and exciting, but the real version where we work together to build something meaningful. I stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the parking lot of Julia's temporary apartment complex. This is going to be hard, Julia. Harder than anything we've ever done. I know. The kids might not forgive you right away. Hell, I might not forgive you right away. I know that too. And everyone in town knows about the affair, about Gavin, about everything. We're going to be the subject of gossip for months. Let them gossip. I'd rather be gossiped about for trying to save my marriage than for destroying it. I turned back to face her. Are you sure this is what you want? Not what you think you should want? Not what looks good on paper? But what you actually want? Julia stood up slowly, the chair legs scraping softly against the hardwood floor as she rose. Her movements were hesitant at first, as if every step toward me required summoning courage she hadn't felt in a long time. The air between us was thick, the kind of stillness that feels alive, humming with everything unsaid. She walked over to where I was standing, stopping just close enough that I could see the faint tremor in her hands. Her eyes glistened with that fragile mix of fear and sincerity that comes when someone has nothing left to hide. "Eric," she began quietly, her voice catching slightly before she steadied it. "For the past 4 months, I've been planning a life without you." She took a slow breath, eyes fixed on mine. "I've imagined what it would be like to be divorced, to be with someone else, to start over completely. I thought freedom meant starting from scratch, wiping the slate clean, reinventing myself without the weight of us." She swallowed hard. "And you know what I discovered?" My throat tightened. "What?" "I discovered that in every version of my future that actually made me happy, you were still there." Her voice broke then, but she pushed through it. "Maybe we were different. Maybe our relationship was different. Maybe we were scarred and older and a little wiser. But you were still there." Her words landed slowly, like pebbles dropping into deep water. "And the kids?" I asked softly, afraid to hope too much. "The kids were there too," she said. "Our kids. In our house. Living the life we built together. Not perfect, not easy, but ours. Every version that felt right had you, me, and them." I tried to hold it together, but the dam broke. The tears I'd been holding back for weeks, maybe months, finally spilled over. I turned away for a moment, embarrassed by the rawness of it, but Julia didn't move closer or pull away. She just let me be, standing quietly in the same space, sharing the silence like we used to. When I could finally speak, my voice was low and uneven. "Julia, I love you. I've loved you since college, when you were the wild one who made plans on napkins and talked about changing the world." I smiled weakly. "I loved you when you left me, and I didn't understand why. And I love you now. But love isn't enough to fix this." Her brow furrowed. "What else do we need?" "Work," I said simply. "Commitment. The willingness to be uncomfortable while we figure out how to trust each other again. It's not going to be romantic or easy. It's going to be messy, exhausting, and sometimes painful." She nodded, tears pooling at the edges of her lashes. "I'm willing to be uncomfortable." "Are you willing to be patient?" I asked. "Because this isn't going to happen overnight. You can't just say sorry and expect everything to fall back into place." Julia took a long, deliberate breath. "I'm willing to take as long as it takes." I studied her face then, really looked at her for the first time in months. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the polished, untouchable Julia who drifted through our life on autopilot. This was someone rawer, quieter, stripped of the illusions she'd been clinging to. She looked tired, yes, but also humbled, vulnerable, and determined in a way I hadn't seen since we were young and broke and sure that love could survive anything. "Okay," I said at last. The word came out small but solid. "Let's try." Julia smiled, a slow, trembling thing that reached her eyes. It wasn't a triumphant smile, not the one she used to win arguments or charm dinner guests. It was real, tentative, human. For the first time since this nightmare began, it felt like maybe, just maybe, we might actually find our way back to each other. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "Don't thank me yet," I said, managing a faint smile. "Thank me in a year if we're still together, and actually happy." She gave a quiet laugh through her tears. "I will. Every day." When I drove home that night, the city lights blurred in the windshield, and for once, the weight in my chest felt lighter. The radio played softly, some half-forgotten song from our college days, and I let it fill the silence. I thought about what I was going to tell the kids, how I'd explain that their mother was coming home, how Zoe would roll her eyes and pretend she didn't care, and how Liam would smile, that small, cautious smile that always said more than words ever could. I thought about second chances. Not the movie version where everything's easy again, but the real kind, messy, fragile, built day by day. I thought about forgiveness, and how it isn't a single decision, but 100 small ones that happen over time. I thought about Gavin Price, probably sitting in some dim bar right now, nursing a drink and planning his next conquest, never understanding that the real prize was never taking something away from someone else. The real prize was building something worth keeping. And I thought about Julia, about how she'd almost lost everything chasing a fantasy, but somehow found the courage to stop running, to face what she'd broken, and to fight for what was real. It wouldn't be easy. There would be late-night arguments, awkward silences, and moments when we'd both wonder if we'd made a mistake. But for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Hope. And sometimes, hope is enough to start with.